listening to Friday Live on Nebraska Public Media. Support for programming comes from the Lead Center for Performing Arts, bringing Sweden's Gunhild Carling to Lincoln on February 20th for a night of swing. Carling is known for playing over 15 instruments and has been a featured player in Scott Bradley's Postmodern Jukebox. Tickets on sale now at leadcenter.org.
It's game night at the Anna Bemis Palmer Museum with Press Play Sunday, February 22nd from 5 to 7 p.m. It's free, open to all ages, and includes classic board games, retro video games, and pizzas on the house. From pixels to pawns, it's a chance to play your way down memory lane. Carrie Remmers is the museum coordinator. How you doing, Carrie?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
So there were bracket-style votes to see what people's favorite games were. Which games won? And do you know why those ones won? Were people voicing their opinions on that, or?
So I did kind of March Madness style brackets because, you know, March is coming up. People are ready. They're ready to fill in their brackets. They're thinking about things like this. And I was like, what a great way to talk about the promotion of this event in a slight and subtle way that gets people thinking, oh, I remember that game. Ooh, I would love to play that game. Kind of a thing again. And the community just kind of like ran with it. I was not expecting to get as many responses. You know, I'm getting like 20 or 30 responses each round. And it was like, what? I was not surprised that Mario Kart dominated the video game category. That was the clear winner. I think there was only one vote in the final round for Duck Hunt, and everybody else picked Mario Kart. I am excited to announce that I have acquired an N64, and the nerd in me is just jumping because I'm such a Nintendo freak. But I have acquired an N64, and there will be Mario Kart 64 set up here during the game night. So please come play that and throw red shells at your spouse. I want to see their response. I mostly like to watch people play that game. That's a lot of fun. But then the board game category, it was very surprising that Clue was the winner. I mean, I am a Clue fan. I love the movie. I love the expansion, that Master Detective version. I don't know that I thought that it would take down, like most people think of like Monopoly or Operation or something like that. But Clue was the clear winner. I don't think it was even close on that last round.
So then I have to ask, you know, what is your favorite game? Board game, video game, both, one or the other?
Well, I am a game nerd. People give me board games for birthdays, Christmas, whatever. I was really excited to be able to show off some of my Nintendo items that I've been kind of collecting because, like I said, I'm kind of a game nerd. I really enjoyed playing Dance Dance Revolution on the PlayStation 2. I really enjoyed SSX Tricky, which is a snowboarding game. Board games. Well, games in general, growing up, my family played a lot of pitch. There were a lot of pitch tournaments at my house. My parents were like the house to go to play pitch, I guess. I don't know if your family ever plays like spoons or anything at Christmas, but my aunts would get vicious. They would like sharpen their nails in anticipation. I loved playing Candyland, which my siblings have all admitted. Now, you got to keep in mind that they are 10 years and older than me. So in their free time or when they were babysitting, I'm sure playing board games with a tiny child was not high on their list. So I was told recently, me thinking I am the ultimate Candyland champion, I have the best luck. I was the best Candyland person. I was recently informed that they actually rigged it so that I could win right away so that the game was then over and then we could move, you know, so great sibling bond there, great babysitting technique. But I'm just really excited to see the community's response. People are talking about games and they're telling me their memories and they're able to link it to the museum because we do have some vintage board games here on display. So this isn't, you know, entirely out of nowhere that it's just like, I like games, I'm going to make you all come and play. No, it's a legit, you know, this is part of technology. There are a lot of technology involved in games, especially the video game aspect. But yeah, there's been some, I don't want to say threats. There's been some smack talk about people coming in, you know, I'm going to take you down and guess who? Oh, it's on for Operation, you know, oh, you're going to be sorry, you know, like the board game stuff like that. So it's been a lot of fun seeing the community really get excited for this program. And I'm sure free pizza doesn't hurt. So
Why are in-person events and gatherings like this important, especially in an age where it's so digital and where people say we're growing more and more socially isolated?
I think this is a great opportunity to kind of bond with your community. The whole thing is it's a family style program, but you can come still fly solo. Nobody's going to judge you if you're, a millennial, a Gen Xer or whatever, and you're just coming and you're like, hey, free pizza. My only requirement for the free pizza, by the way, is that you have to engage in some sort of game. Don't walk in, eat pizza and walk out. But no, I think the community thing has been really the bread and butter for this museum. And the programs have honestly been the majority of our foot traffic for our exhibits. And it's because each single program is tied to what that exhibit is about. And it's just so cool to see the diversity in the community that shows up. This isn't going to be, all families. You might see some seniors show up. You might see some millennials show up. You might see, some York University students show up and be excited about it. And I think it's really cool in a museum aspect because it's probably not something that you think of when you think of museums and history, but the exhibit right now is all about retro technology. And I do have Mario and Donkey Kong posters in the background of one of my displays. And a lot of people brought them up, which is kind of, why we had the program in the first place. Oh, I love that game. Oh, I do that. And then it was like, well, I thought it was just me that's this nerdy collector in York, and it turns out there's more of us. And so it's just going to be the whole horde of people just collectively gathering at the museum that night, I think. So
are there going to be tournaments set up? For something like Mario Kart or Smash Brothers or any of those games, there's, often tournaments set up. So are there going to be any tournaments, or is it going to be kind of more of a, you come, you play some games, eat some pizza?
I mean, you can come for 20 minutes, play a game, eat some pizza, walk out. You can stay for the full 2 hours if you want. I have a blueprint in my mind where I have, like Dance Dance Revolution set up in the entryway. I've got Mario Kart on the TV. I've got Contra, Q*bert, maybe some, I don't know, Excite Bike, something on the Nintendo. Then in the middle, I'm going to have tables full of board games. So it's entirely up to the person and their preference. If they want to do a tournament and people are in for that, I'm totally open to that. As long as they're not, like hogging the machine and letting other people play and stuff like that. I don't have a problem with that. It's really kind of, I'm just going to go with the flow and see how people feel. And it also kind of depends on attendance too. If I get 2 people, then yeah, we're going to tournament away. It's going to be awesome. If I get 200 people, it's going to be like, okay, you've played, let's move on to the, the different stations and try things. So I'm not worried about attendance at all. York people show up for the museum, and our biggest supporters show up to the event, regardless of what it is. I just had movie night. We hosted a showing of The Matrix at the Sun Theater, and people showed up to the event, seniors who knew nothing about The Matrix or anything about sci-fi was not their thing at all, but they showed up to just support the museum. And I'm just so blessed to have that kind of community behind me.
So just as a final question, it seems like the idea of nostalgia has been particularly strong within, the cultural zeitgeist as of late. What role does nostalgia play in this? It seems like a dumb question, but what role does nostalgia play in this event?
Nostalgia is everything in this event because I'm focusing on the classic board games and the classic video games. If people decide that they love this program and they want to do something more modern, I'm totally open to that. Let's, play Halo. Let's play Call of Duty. Let's play Pokemon. Let's, we could host a Pokemon Go tournament around York. I don't care. But the focus for us really is to focus on the classics because we are a museum. And so that kind of ties us to the museum. And also a lot of people like seniors and stuff like that are going to be more familiar with the classics. And like you said, nostalgia is everywhere these days. It's so much fun. I don't know if that is like things are so volatile right now in the world that people want to go back into their comfort zone. And that means thinking about what they did in their childhood and what makes them happy. And, I want to play this card game. I want to play Guess Who. I want to play, Contra or Mario Kart or whatever like that, because that makes them happy. And it kind of puts them in their own little bubble and away from all the crazy people on social media or the crazy politics that are in the world right now, or just, anything negative. And it's nice to have the nostalgia to kind of like make you feel happy and comfortable. And part of that nostalgia is also like going back to what was important to you during your childhood years. And so I'm really excited to be able to focus on the classic games. And again, like I said, if people want to do a more modern version, I'm totally open to that. That's no problem at all.
Press Play runs Sunday, February 22nd from 5 to 7 p.m. at the Anna Bemis Palmer Museum in York. While you're there, you can also check out Analog Anthology, a retro tech showcase on display through February 27th, featuring everyday technologies from before the digital age. The museum is open Tuesday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. More details are available through the Friday Live page at nebraskapublicmedia.org. Carrie, I really appreciate you chatting with me.
Thanks for having me on. It was great.
You're listening to Friday Live on Nebraska Public Media. Some of concert music's greatest hits are taking the stage when the Hastings Symphony presents From New Worlds and the annual Young Artist Competition on Sunday, February 22nd at 3 p.m. at the Masonic Center Auditorium. We spoke to the Young Artist Competition winner, Elliot Mashka, as a part of this week's Friday Live Extra podcast on the Friday Live page, nebraskapublicmedia.org. He'll be performing Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, and the program also features Saint-Saëns' Danse Macabre and Dvorak's from New World Symphony is the name of that. Adding a word there that doesn't need to be there. Conducting the concert is Dr. Tyler White. Thank you so much for coming in this morning and braving the snow.
Well, you're most welcome. It's not too bad out there. Better than last night.
Better than last night by a good couple miles, which you couldn't travel last night thanks to the snow. So, starting things off with the thing that people probably first interact with when they're interacting with the show, which is the title, From New Worlds. Mm-hmm. You're playing the New World Symphony, checks out there. You're playing Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, which is a probably quintessentially American piece, right? Yes. The New World. How does Danse Macabre fit into that lineup?
Well, really by hook or by crook, because every year at the Hastings Symphony Gala, one of the live auction items is the opportunity to select a piece for one of the concerts on the following season, and I always make a few suggestions. And one of my suggestions was the Danse Macabre, and that happened to be the winning bid. This was as I say, it's not a direct tie-in to the New World theme, not as much as Dvorak or having a young artist competition winner representing the next generation of performers, but it's a great piece and a beloved piece, and lots of spooky fun.
So, I mean, I guess in a way, in every person's life, they enter a new world that is the world of the dead, right?
That's true. That's absolutely true. And it's a piece that has a real special place in my heart because it was one of the first pieces as a kid that really hit me. First pieces of classical music that I really loved and listened to over and over again, and so it's a great way to start the program.
Returning to Gershwin and Dvorak, those are artists from very different times, but they're both writing about America in a way. What do you feel like Dvorak would think of Gershwin's music and vice versa?
Well, we know that Gershwin admired Dvorak quite a bit, and I think Dvorak would have loved Gershwin. Dvorak was very interested in distinctively American music, the music of African Americans, of Native Americans, and he incorporates those influences into the New World Symphony. In fact, he really wrote his E minor symphony to really demonstrate what could be done within the classical tradition with specifically American musical materials. It's a fascinating work. It was at the time he was writing it, Dvorak was also contemplating writing an opera on Longfellow's Song of Hiawatha. And although he never finished the opera, he wrote a substantial amount of music, which he then plowed into the symphony. And so, and interestingly, the symphony is kind of operatic, that the themes, a lot of the themes are used kind of as operatic leitmotifs, and they return representing characters and emotional states. And one of the things I feel really strongly about this piece is, and then one of the reasons it's so such a powerful evocation of America, is because it's ambivalent. It's
A melting pot, in a way?
in a way. Dvorak was fascinated by America, but at the same time, he was enormously homesick for Bohemia. And so there's a lot of that pain, even coming through the appreciation for his American surroundings. He wrote the piece he wrote the piece in New York City, not in Nebraska or Iowa, but in fact had to finish the piece very quickly in order to get to leave with his family for their vacation in Iowa, in Spillville. But he uses these Hiawatha themes as well as the African American spiritual theme, the going home theme, over and over again in the symphony, returning to these emotional states as they pass through different circumstances, and the circumstances are not always happy. Ultimately, the piece is trying to find something positive and triumphant out of a great deal of pain. If there's a sense in the last movement that this is a real evocation of noble pioneers on the prairie, it's just as much about the people who didn't make it, who
didn't get to go home,
or gave up trying to make it on the prairie, and the women in sod houses who went insane from the incessant wind and
or got snowed in and stuff.
Exactly. The harshness of that life in that period comes through, and so there's a real sense of trying to come up with something triumphant out of all that hardship, and the piece ends with this beautiful long chord and this quiet chord in the winds that just sort of asks the question. And it's really important, and I think germane to American life today. Are we going to make it?
A question that I'm sure many people are asking themselves.
It's on no matter what your political persuasion. It's a question that's on a lot of people's minds.
On the question of who we'd be making it for, you work with a lot of young artists all the time as a professor at UNL. Like right now, you're working with Elliot as a part of the Young Artist Competition. They get a lot from you, working with you and your career. So. What do you get from working with them?
Oh, well, that's easy. Easy and indefinable. There's enormous energy, enormous creativity, fresh approaches, and it's wonderful to interact with them, to help them to understand the performance traditions that they're taking part in, as well as fully embracing and celebrating their new energy they're bringing to the act of musical interpretation.
Fantastic. You've been hearing from Dr. Tyler White, conductor of the Hastings Symphony. We've been talking about From New Worlds and the Young Artist Competition taking place Sunday, February 22nd at 3 p.m. at the Masonic Center Auditorium. You can hear our interview with Elliot Mashka, the winner of the Symphony's Young Artist Competition, on the Friday Live page at nebraskapublicmedia.org. Thank you so much, Tyler, for coming on the show.
It's been a pleasure.
Again, this week's Friday Live Extra, we went classical and we spoke to Nebraska's Young Artist Competition winner, Elliot Mashka, as well as with 2 other members of the Nebraska Chamber Players.
I had never played this note on piccolo before, let alone in public, so that's very exciting for those listening that are familiar. It's the D, not above the staff, but 2 Ds above the staff, but then it's on piccolo, so it's actually an octave above that. So I don't even know. I can't count that high, actually, so I don't know how many octaves above middle C that is.
Hear about that special note as well as a whole lot more by heading to the Friday Live page to listen at nebraskapublicmedia.org. Coming up, hear about where UNL Opera is bringing La Boheme, as well as about the upcoming Youth Masterworks Festival. This is Friday Live on Nebraska Public Media. I'm Penelope Morrow. Support for programming comes from Abend Music, presenting its Youth Masterworks Festival. More than 300 high school students will fill the lead stage to perform Christopher Tin's choral orchestral work, The Drop That Contained the Sea, directed by Dorita Seth. Monday, February 23rd at 7:30 p.m. in the Lead Center for Performing Arts. For tickets, leadcenter.org. Support for programming also comes from The Ross. Opening this weekend is Arco, an animated journey through time about a 10-year-old boy from a peaceful, distant future who accidentally travels back to the year 2075 and discovers a world in peril. And Oscar Shorts, showcasing short films from around the world in 3 categories: animated, live action, and documentary. theross.org.
UNL Opera is taking Puccini's La Boheme on the road this month, bringing a fully staged opera production to central Nebraska. The tour is part of the program's ongoing effort to reach audiences beyond Lincoln. Performances take place Sunday, February 22nd at 3 p.m. at the Friend Historical Society's San Carlo Room, and Saturday, February 28th at 3 p.m. at the Golden Husk Theater in Ord. Today I'm joined by Bill Shomos, director of UNL Opera. Good to talk to you, Bill.
Hi, Arthur. How's it going?
So, without spoiling too much, can you give us a brief look into what La Boheme is about?
The story itself, I mean, it covers the trials of young, starving artists, and it follows how they navigate through the journey of life and love, I think is a good way to say it.
So it could be relatable to now to some.
It could. It always is. And, you know, it came from an era in opera where there was a focus on realistic stories of a reasonable period. And so it's like a slice of life. It's a very natural feeling kind of thing. There's a great love story between Rodolfo, the poet, and Mimi, the seamstress. They fall in love at first sight one evening, but she's sick, and the story happens, and she dies tragically at the end, and in a sort of delicious way that only Puccini and opera can deliver in such a satisfying way.
What made La Boheme the right choice to take on the road? Why that one?
Several reasons. First, whenever I choose a piece of repertoire for our opera program, I try very hard to align it with who we have in the program, who needs to have an opportunity. And so this is always a top priority for me. When this first idea of touring Boheme began to emerge, my friend Don Haggie, who runs the Golden Husk in Ord, had approached me. She said, it's time maybe to have you folks back. We're thinking February, anything kind of Valentine's-ish. And again, this Boheme is a great love story. It's very romantic, and so that occurred to me. And I also was looking for something that we could tour well in sort of a limited kind of way. Now, Boheme can be done a lot of different ways. There's the great Franco Zeffirelli production that's been at the Met for I think decades now, and it's huge cast of thousands, spectacular scenery. but it could also be done very intimately. What we've done is we've pared it down. We're doing it with just piano, although Dennis Plutaloff, our pianist, makes the thing sound like an orchestra. We're focusing in on the main characters. We've cut away all of the chorus business, and so the piece has a very intimate feel. And I've actually done it different ways throughout my career, both big productions and a couple times like this with these very small things where you really get into the hearts of the characters, and I think it's working beautifully. Plus our space, the Golden Husk has a full stage, but it's not a huge theater, and the San Carlo room, we have a very small stage that we're working on, and it started off as a challenge, and then it just feels really right. This sort of tight, almost claustrophobic feeling really worked beautifully with the show's message.
How do you get that to work with different stage sizes, logistically? How is planning that?
Well, what we don't have are big, heavy set pieces. We're using just pieces of furniture, and the furniture could come close together, it could be spread apart, and so that facilitates that aspect of it. And so we just roll with the space. That's one of the really great things about touring that's advantageous for our students, is that it's training in flexibility and adaptability. I've played both places before, so I'm very confident that it's going to go very well.
As far as the singing, I'll say do you have to sing differently in a room?
So
do you have to kind of adjust to a room, or?
Actually, the adjustment you have to make to the room is to not adjust to the room, because every acoustic is going to be different, but the way that you sing really shouldn't change that much. One of the phrases that singers will say to each other, and we hear it all the time, is, "Oh, it's a great acoustic, you don't have to push." And I'm thinking, what acoustic is there where you have to push? Because this is the point is you don't want to push. You want to let your instrument resonate, and you have to not be fooled by what kind of feedback you're getting from a space. And so it's the discipline to stay the course when it comes to your singing technique.
Yeah.
And in fact, that's the flexibility, because you don't get the same responses back. It's kind of a goofy thing, right? You have to adapt by not changing. Even though everything in your ear says, "Oh, I've got to make a change," and the skill is in staying the course and trusting your instrument.
So just one final question. Why is it important to bring opera to rural communities like Ord and Frent?
We've been at this really sort of officially since about 2015, when Jim and Rhonda Seacrest came to us and asked us. Essentially, they asked me what was important, what was some way that they could support us. And this had actually always been a dream of mine, to take what we do in Lincoln out to greater Nebraska. And it's pretty simple. We're the flagship university. We belong to the entire state of Nebraska. The entire state of Nebraska supports UNL. Opera is easily available to our Lincoln audiences, and certainly Omaha has Opera Omaha. But I really thought it was so important for us to take what we do at the university and bring it out to rural Nebraska, to share our art, to share our work with those communities, and also to build within the students a sense of value of outreach. Because I think in all of our careers, we as artists, we're always looking to expand our audiences, and sometimes you have to take what you do to the audiences. And this is why the Seacrest gift has been so essential for this, because opera, first in and of itself, is expensive. Touring it with all the personnel, all the tech people you need, it's expensive. And that we have patrons of that caliber who also believe in this is really a wonderful thing. Rhonda Seacrest has continued to support us. So it's that, I think. We want to share what we do, and we don't want to be bound to our own place.
UNL Opera's touring production of Puccini's La Bohème performs Sunday, February 22nd in Friend, and Saturday, February 28th in Ord. Both performances feature UNL student singers with live accompaniment and are open to the public. I've been speaking with director Bill Shomos. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Thank you, Arthur. Appreciate it.
If you missed something or want to learn more, the Friday Live page at nebraskapublicmedia.org has links to more information.
Questo mar rosso mi ammollisce assina.
Thanks for listening to Nebraska Public Media. This is Friday Live. Upend Music brings hundreds of young musicians together for the Youth Masterworks Festival on Monday, February 23rd at 7:30 p.m. at the Lead Center in Lincoln. More than 300 high school students will fill the stage to perform The Drop That Contained the Sea by Christopher Tin, joined by the Lincoln Youth Symphony Orchestra. My guest today is Upend Music Artistic Director Tom Trenny. Welcome to Friday Live.
Thank you so much. Good to be with you.
Good to have you here. So, 300 high schoolers is a lot of kids to have to deal with. How challenging would you say that it's been, and maybe what's the most challenging aspect of the show?
It's a wonderful experience to try to herd all these folks together, right?
Herd, though.
So there are 5 high school choirs that are involved, and they've been each learning the piece in their own quarters. I got the joy of having them come together on Tuesday at First Plymouth for a mass rehearsal, and that was the first time they got to feel what it's like for all. I think it's about 226, if I remember, of the singers that are in the program. They got to hear for the first time what it's going to be like to be this giant
200 people all together,
and that was pretty awesome. And I think they could feel the power, that sort of the spiritual power, the emotive power that they would have as a community. And I often realize, so often our schools come together to challenge each other in some kind of event and to try to be better than the other school for a sporting competition or some other kind of competition. And so this event is especially unusual, I think, in that it brings everybody together to do the same thing at the same time in a very positive and constructive way. So then, of course, the Youth Symphony, I got to meet them a week Tuesday at their rehearsal, and those wonderful young people are playing into this score so well, and I could just imagine, after having been in both places, how exciting it will be on Monday when we all come together in the lead to bring this piece to life. It'll be the first time that it's been performed in Nebraska, actually, so pretty cool.
Does it sort of eventually get sort of like a band camp vibe where you've got a lot of kids who are like from other schools meeting for the first time and like interacting about art and stuff, or is it pretty focused?
I think there is some of that, and certainly some of the students who recognize each other from other activities and events really enjoy getting to see each other unusually as they're kind of together on the stage. So they've got the students seated in the choir kind of intermixed between groups, so that's nice too. They'll get to make some new friends and enjoy a day downtown together. So,
on the topic of the piece, tell us a bit about Christopher Tin's The Drop That Contained the Sea.
Yeah, Christopher Tin is known and very famous for being a video game composer. And as you can imagine, his music is very engaging and colorful and kind of captivating in a way. I think that was one of the reasons we chose it for this particular event, because we thought the student instrumentalists and singers would really enjoy this kind of more adventurous style, very rhythmic, and also I think it's something that people, whether they are a musician or not, will really enjoy hearing. And of course, for this particular concert, it's a lot of grandparents and aunts and uncles and moms and dads and brothers and sisters. I think all of them will find great joy in this piece. the drop that contain the sea is a movement a piece that has 10 movements. We're going to sing 6 of them. Each of the movements, all 10, are in different languages. And so the students actually, in the 6 movements we are doing, are sounding 6 languages, which is another cool thing. And each of them tells a story of the kind of power of water in the human experience in one way or other. So it's a very interesting piece, and I think one that will really be enjoyed.
Partially a question for me. What games has Christopher Tin scored, and do you see that like some kids kind of connect better with the piece as that aspect comes into it of like media that they are oftentimes enjoying more frequently than other folks?
I think the students would know the answer to your first part of your question more than I do. My kids aren't quite old enough to know that kind of fact yet either. But yeah, I think you're right. They do sense that vibe in it, and so it was really cool to see their engagement, even in the learning and some of the tricks and traps of it. Because you can pick. It's kind of music you can picture. It's not a soundtrack, but you could sort of picture it as a movie score and imagine what the drama is that you're singing into at any given moment. So it's really, really wonderful. And the fusion of the orchestra. I was telling the students the other day, when I was their age, I never had a chance to sing with an orchestra. And I never had a chance to sing a multi-movement choral orchestral work for sure. And so this is a really unique experience that we have here. I'm grateful to Abend Music for supporting it, and for the community, all the school teachers that are really anxious to be involved in the Youth Symphony. Clark Potter's their director, and he's been a wonderful partner in this. So every other year, we rent out the Leeds Center because we can't fit all of these people in our usual home over at First Plymouth.
Not without squeezing together pretty tight.
So it's wonderful, and we certainly hope a lot of folks from the community will come to cheer them on as well. It's probably one of the largest gatherings of youth that people can come and cheer on all at once at the same time. So,
in addition to the community supporting y'all, in turn, there's going to be a free will offering that will benefit the Bay at the event. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us about the work that the Bay does?
Yeah, the Bay does a lot of programming and outreach to youth who might otherwise not have somewhere to go after school, or who might not have positive activities to be involved in because of things that might be going on in their family situation. And so everything from skateboarding to all kinds of super fun things. And they sponsor lots of summer camps and things for others in the community too. So we thought it would be a wonderful nonprofit partner for this particular event, which involves so many youth, that they can also know they're supporting other youth's experience and in the community. So we're grateful. All of our Abend Music concerts are free because we have had wonderful support from the community, and where we make all of them a fundraiser for a different nonprofit. So that's a really joyful thing to be a part of.
How does that, and I guess the entire project, the show, fit into Abend Music's larger mission?
Yeah. We talk about our mission being to gather people to experience music that inspires. And that may be to say that the music itself inspires you to a certain kind of feeling or emotion, but it also, I think there's a ... after that in my head anyway, that inspires what? That inspires people to go from the concert, not just to say, oh, that was nice, but rather to go with an inspiration to go to do something good in the world, because something about the experience there might have changed their heart or their awareness of, it might have tipped them to see more beauty in one another, in the world, to be inspired to go and do something good. And I'm so grateful to be part of an organization like that. You know, I don't think we do music just for music's sake, although that's a noble thing. We do it to see how the beauty of music can help people to find a new way to love and serve and give that maybe they hadn't thought about before.
I am curious, just because you bring up the idea of people going forth from shows to go on and do good things, if you have any examples of people who are either like alumnus of a project like this, kids who have interacted with Abend Music and went on to do something in the arts, do something creative like that in a positive sense, or maybe even like someone in the audience who went for it to do something that you know of.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's funny you should say that, because my some of my current students at Nebraska Wesleyan saw the sign hanging up about the Youth Masterworks Festival, and it was so fun to hear them sing excerpts of some of the masterworks they had sung during their high school years. And they're continuing to pursue music and to be faithful people in their community on the college campus and beyond. So yeah, I think certainly from the ripple effects of the other concerts, for example, we know that the last program that we did, the St. Olaf Choir, just came to visit. We were able to send $5,500 to Lutheran Family Services, and they already sent us a letter of somebody whose life has been impacted by that gift. And so you never know how the fingerprints of one good thing will lead into the DNA of another good thing, and that's a great pond to be rippling in. So.
That was Abend Music Artistic Director Tom Trenny telling us about the Youth Masterworks Festival happening Monday, February 23rd at 7:30 p.m. at the Lead Center in Lincoln. The concert features more than 300 high school singers and the Lincoln Youth Symphony Orchestra playing The Drop That Contained the Sea. More details are available on the Friday Live page at nebraskapublicmedia.org. Tom, thank you so much for coming on today's show.
Thank you very much.
Stick around later for poetry from Twyla Hansen, as well as to hear about a multimedia art exhibition in Omaha that focuses on being a good neighbor. The Correspondent, a novel by Virginia Evans, is an unusual book in several ways. It's a story told in the form of letters written by Sybil, a woman who seems to make sense of her world through writing. All About Books host Pat Leach notes another reason she found this main character enjoyable to follow.
It's an interesting story about an older person. Much of it refers back to things that happened decades ago, yes. But Sybil is an interesting person still. She grows. That's the compelling aspect of her vibrancy. She can be abrupt and hold a grudge, yes, but she does listen to the people she loves and soften sometimes.
You can hear a review of The Correspondent, a novel by Virginia Evans, on our website, nebraskapublicmedia.org/allaboutbooks.
This is Twyla Hansen, and this morning I'm going to read you a few poems. This poem is titled Late Winter Survival. First, attempt to describe the blackbirds, the plentiful anonymous mass in the top of the cottonwood. Begin with black, copious and red-winged, knowing that anything specific will point only to more uncertainty. They will perch there, noisy and prim, defying also narration. Your mouth will be slack, your neck craned. In the populace, meaning prevalent, meaning of little ornamental value, the tree that grew like a weed. Forget the Canadian breeze, the chill that knuckles your resolve, the snow deeper than recent memory. It will bring to mind those monster drifts of old days, how you and your brother climbed into the heights of the shoulder belt, later slid into muck, the farmstead and roadsides and countryside, a sea of endless mud, until summer, when the wind exhaled, the soil cracked, and you ached for rain. Oh, my child, how you dreamed. And now this cackling confusion of starlings overhead, the sun at a sharper angle, rousing the earth. Not the songbirds you smile at, but a migrating pack that grows darker with each passing day. Right now, the earth is tilted just so, and the sunlight is brilliant, and everything, every last thing seems possible. And the last poem I will read you is called Life on the Farm. Winter was when I most thought of the beyond, how the northern sky could dance and flame, and the moon through my tall bedroom window lit the snow-laden tree ghosts, and wondered if overhead points of light were dead stars, and how one day I might step out into that curve of earth, away from the creek cased in ice, yet flowing beneath, sheltered birds in the windbreak, fields blanketed with stubble, the sweet damp breath of dairy cows in the barn rising, wrapped in flannel and wool, awake late in the quiet house, questioning my mother's "nothing good ever happens after midnight," while hearing my father who, wistful, gazed up in the dark and said, "Dream big. Get all the learning you can." Thank you.
Twyla Hansen read Late Winter Survival and Life on the Farm. Hansen was Nebraska State Poet from 2013 until 2018. Raised in northeast Nebraska on land her grandparents farmed as Danish immigrants, she now resides in Lincoln on her wooded and wildflowered acre of urban wildlife habitat. Omaha-based sculptor, educator, and printmaker Benjamin Wills' latest exhibition, Neighborhood, opened earlier this month at Radial Arts Center in Omaha. Through this exhibition, Wills explores what it means to be a neighbor in 2026 through print, sculpture, and performance. The immersive show also pays homage to the enduring legacy of Fred Rogers, inviting visitors to connect with the work and each other while seeing a familiar face in a contemporary context. Ben joins me here today. How you doing, Ben?
I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. So how did you first come to know Mr. Rogers?
Oh, well, so I know Mr. Rogers from him just kind of being the third parent when I was growing up. I turned 40 this year, so I'm like the perfect age for like 80s toddlering, and early 90s just sitting at home and, consuming an hour or so of Mr. Rogers every day. So I think Mr. Rogers is very much like a big part of like being a TV kid from that era.
I'm the same way. I'm the exact same way.
Yeah, and he's never really left the lexicon. And since I was a little kid, I think that I always really loved Mr. Rogers just because he was so focused on doing things with your hands. And I was always a kid that would rather be doing something than watching. I didn't have video games growing up or whatever. So I was very much an outside kid who would, I would watch Mr. Rogers teach me how to make a card with a piece of construction paper. And then for the rest of the week, I'd be like, I'm making cards,
Mm-hmm. So for the listeners, and so, for someone who has not been to this art exhibition yet, how does Mr. Rogers connect to this larger exhibition? How is he weaved through it?
So it's very, very much about Fred Rogers, or, his message is really kind of evergreen because it's just Mr. Rogers episodes, every episode's different, but then also every episode's the same, just in that the overall structure is who's in your neighborhood, who is somebody that you're going to be friends with, and then beyond that, how can you help that person? Right? That's every single episode. And I've always really been somebody that's taken that to heart. I am the neighbor that shovels everybody's sidewalk. We're the family that has whatever your family doesn't have, or, we're always ready to help people. And the whole project, I've been thinking about it for a really long time. And the project, there's a really famous picture of Mr. Rogers that I think almost everybody's familiar with, of him sitting on the bench and putting his shoes on. And so I rebuilt that set, and we are having everybody that comes to the show come in. And as soon as you come in, you're greeted at the door and you sit down, and I pose you in the exact same way with your knee across and you're holding your shoe. And then we have a photographer that takes, and then I bought, we have a bunch of sweaters, all of them just the same red sweater, but in every size. So, we have everywhere from a child's one to a triple XL or something like that. And so it's just about placing yourself in to the community and thinking about it the same way that, you know, maybe Mr. Rogers would have inspired us to think about our communities, right? So it's kind of like trying to reflect like, hey, the viewers of the art or the people that come, like trying to kind of make a connection with them and to start having people think a little bit more about like, what would the Mr. Rogers outlook on whatever it is we're doing be right now?
So you mentioned photography, and in my introduction, I mentioned print, sculpture, and performance. You're using a number of different types of media in this exhibit. Can you speak to how each one is incorporated? You've already mentioned photography.
It's kind of nice because I do a lot of performative art, and this time I've kind of switched it that everyone that's coming in actually really becomes the performer. I place you as Mr. Rogers, and there's this like performative aspect that's happening. There's a photographer that's there. Then I've made screen prints of Mr. Rogers, and it's the same image over and over, but then I switch the ink in my screen every time I did his sweater. So you can buy any color sweater that you want. I've got a bunch of prints in there. And then inside, if you've been into radio, that the front room is that. But then the back room, we're playing Mr. Rogers on a video. We have a couch in there and like a lamp, and there's just sort of like a social, like it like turns it into more of like a gathering place for people that are there. And in that room is where we're printing out the pictures that are happening in the front room. So while you're in there, you're seeing like what's happening in the front room. And so it becomes like a really more of like a interactive experience more so than what would probably be more of like a traditional, like one of my like more like sculptural or painting shows. Yeah. Yeah.
And just as a final question, and I think we're kind of getting to this community aspect, it feels like a lot of people in our, today are struggling to find that sense of community. Why to you is it more important now to be a good neighbor? You talked about this earlier and how you try to be one, but, sort of why is that important?
Like the timing of this show is really funny, right? Because like Mr. Rogers has come up like just recently because of everything that's happening kind of like in Minnesota right now. But I booked this show maybe in August, and we were talking about like what this show was going to be. I don't think that there's ever a wrong time to start thinking about your neighbors, right? I think that most of the happiness that I have in my life has just been reflected back to me from what I do to show up for other people. A lot of the work that I've done in the past, I do a lot of work where I've gone into prisons and helped incarcerated people. I've done a lot of work through the mail. I really like long-term projects where you can really communicate with somebody for a long time. The work that I typically do doesn't stand really without a performative aspect or without a collaboration with somebody who is maybe not really thinking of what they're doing as art. So I've just always been drawn to the idea that art is going to be the thing that is super accessible to everybody. I try to make work that people, as soon as they're kind of looking at it, like it's kind of an onion, like you can keep on peeling back the layers, but like right from like the very beginning, like it's like maybe there's something that's a little bit on the nose right in the beginning, but like the more you stay into it, like the more that people are in the room, like first you're just taking your picture like it's Mr. Rogers, right? But then all of a sudden that room's full of people watching you do it, and they're shouting to you like, no, put your knee up a little bit more, and like it turns into like a huge conversation, and like tons of people are doing something. And then, if you can create like a small little event that like people think about, like, oh, what I loved when we went to, Benson First Friday and we did that thing, like that is way more beneficial. Or like, I think of that, like, that's a really fun use of my time. That's the kind of thing that like I reflect back on, be like, I'm really happy that that's how I was able to use my moment in the gallery.
Artist Benjamin Wills with his new exhibit, Neighborhood, which explores the legacy of Fred Rogers. The exhibit runs until February 27th at Radial Art Center in Omaha, where there will be a closing reception from 6 to 9 p.m. Check out the Friday Live page at nebraskapublicmedia.org for more information. Ben, thanks so much for coming in today.
Hey, thank you so much.
Coming up this morning on Nebraska Public Media, music from Nebraska's stages on Nebraska Concerts hosted by Laura Black. And this afternoon, I'm bringing you Classics by Request, music that's locally grown by you here on Nebraska Public Media. I think I've still got a bit of room in the playlist, so if you'd like to make a contribution, just visit our website, nebraskapublicmedia.org/request. Be sure to visit the Nebraska Public Media website for podcasts of the show at nebraskapublicmedia.org. Portions of Friday Live are pre-recorded. Friday Live is not possible without the collaboration of Brendan Rook, Phoenix Carroll, KJ Tedder, Cole McEwen, and associate producer Arthur Jones. I'm Penelope Morrow.
Everything we do at Nebraska Public Media is possible only with members who donate. This podcast version of our weekly radio show Friday Live, podcasts of our television show Backyard Farmer, and so much more, all of it is thanks to donors, underwriters, and other private support. You can support Nebraska Public Media online at nebraskapublicmedia.org.